Hello. I want to hope people are doing well out there, and I just wanted to step forward with a little bit of inspiration that was kind of coming to me as I was focusing on something of completely different. I was focusing on music this afternoon, but then I had a little bit of an insight kind of based around some experiences I had today while doing shopping with a family member, and also that I've had recently around like uploading videos and stuff like that. And I wanted to maybe to talk about like some different things that have been on my mind kind of regard to like what we see in our feed, like whether I kind of skirt social media more or less, where I've engaged with YouTube for quite a while, and I used to be what's been eloquently described by some YouTubers such as the influential Fresh and Fit podcast, where they talk about ninja watchers, which are like people that watch videos and they don't reveal their presence, and they don't engage with the content. And that was me for quite a long time. I remember I probably watched YouTube for maybe like that'd be like one of the main things I did for like maybe like 7-10 years. And I probably left like maybe like somewhere like 20 likes in that entire time, and something had to really move me, and I wasn't trying to be stingy, but something had to really move me to engage with it. But after I remember when Fresh and Fit first became a very influential, like as we were kind of coming out of the pandemic, and they were kind of like in one place where people could maybe feel a little bit social, like engaging with that type of content while we were still fettered or under lockdown. I remember I was getting ready to leave a post on one of their videos, and it was gonna be like this bombastic, pretentious, absurd, good-spirited, good-natured post that would have really made me look like I would have looked silly trying to write something like that at that time. But you can change a lot even in 4 years, and my computer failed as I was about to make that post. But then going after that was their humor in talking about like being the ninja watcher, that slowly changed my trajectory to where I started engaging with content more, and then I started leaving different comments on different things, and then some I even left some. I started. My first comments were probably like more affirmative and like very inspirational, but then at a certain point, I actually gave comments that could appear like maybe contrary or even critical. But those might actually be the best comments, because for one, a person where I was coming from, I wouldn't engage with the material if I didn't like really respect the person, and like if I wasn't moved by it, whether saying something affirmative or contrary. But just sometimes saying something contrary is it's like a it's like that iron sharpens iron thing. It's like if you can say something contrary but with a good nature, you can kind of bring the best out of people. So I've gotten some contrary comments in like different forms, like when I was in school, and and like a lot of the online programs they're kind of like they were in the last 10-15 years, they were kind of leading up to our new social reality of where you actually learn the most by peer engagement and teaching one another. And it's like a social form, but that was very effective even in a college setting, learning like that. But some of the comments were the ones were a little bit critical. I think I've actually grown the most out of those. But then some comments are if I think it's not so much what you say, but where you're coming from when you say something. So then this last I've experienced a lot of turbulence and disrespect in a lot of job settings, like even as I'm doing professional work with a professional license, where sometimes people simply won't cooperate with you if they perceive you a certain way, whether even if you're bringing competence and you're conducting yourself professionally. Sometimes people just simply they won't participate, or they won't engage with you. And so even in something like communication, communication is really a two-way thing. And I had this experience once where I was working at a counter at a sandwich shop, and there were two customers that came in there that were once quite they were quite rude to the point where if I had more experience of living, like I would recognize that's a serious situation when people are like that, and there's a lot that might be going on when they're acting like that. But one of them was she disrespected my manager who was being respectful with her, but in a quite egregious way that having to do with his body structure that wasn't called for, and I didn't understand how significant that was. But then there was another person that came in there, and something about the way I spoke to her, and the way that what she said back to me, and then also her demeanor, it was such that it actually became difficult to communicate with her, like to actually to form words. Like if somebody is subtle enough yet also disrespectful enough, it can actually make communication differently, because as we're communicating, we're forming it's like a deep feedback thing where we're forming an impression of how our words are landing, what we're choosing to say, and it's a very deep communion that's happening when people are speaking. And not to go on a different subject, but that book the works of Arthur Avalon talk about in some of the traditions of Bharata or India, they think that speech is so profound as though it is presided over by a deity or a higher form of consciousness, in that we can actually, within our human body, we can have different profound planes of consciousness that are existing within us, and one of their methods and modes and functions is actually our very speech. And speech is a lot more difficult, is a lot more complex than we can generally fathom as we're engaging with it. I think the famous linguist but also thought leader Noam Chomsky, he talked about how if you observe the syntax and the conjugation of even like small children, like maybe like 4 or 5 years old, what they're doing with the language even at that age, it's so complex that from his perspective as someone studying languages scientifically, it would be very daunting, if not impossible, for a human being or anything to learn that much nuance and scope within the amount of time that child has been living. So such to say that from a scientific perspective, he's saying that some of our capacity and facility with language is actually innate, and that it's more so it's engendered or it's activated by exposure to a language, but the deeper structures of the language are actually already within us. And I think there's some people that say the same thing about knowledge, which is that all the things that we learn, even engaging with a video like this or in reading a book, on a level we actually already came into this life knowing that, and this experience of reading something is like a remembrance. And so I would say even on a certain level, sometimes I feel like our very life is like that, where the experiences we're having, we're actually more so remembering them than living them, such that like when you have a memory of something, it's not necessarily that your mind collected that much data when you were in a situation, but rather that is actually a feature of your destiny, and you are conscious of that. Having lived through it, you become familiar with that aspect of your destiny, but on a certain way it had already existed, and it still exists, and that's what the actual memory is. It's actually engaging with our destiny more so than just information. I think the idea of the brain as a computer is very arbitrary, and it reflects like methods and modes of our means of production, like from the digital age and then the industrial age, and some of even at the time that some of our understanding of the human brain was becoming more developed, like in the last couple hundred years, we had already been steeped in industrialism, and so a lot of our means of thinking had to do with like electricity and machinery and hoarding and producing capital. So I think that then we can't help but to lend some of these lenses that are based in like productivity onto our human being, our human vessel. But I think that such that like engaging the mind as though we're a computer is a little bit arbitrary and absurd, and it reflects other economic realities more so than what a human being is. And so I was running with that as far as like memory and destiny. But just to say that speech is quite profound. In India, there's a deity that's named Divani, that is associated with being responsible for speech. And then I think when you combine that speech with also wisdom, then you have like Saraswati or there's a word that's that distinct living and enunciated wisdom. And there's the order Osho that I often quote. If I quote him like incessantly, but if you ever listen to some of his content, I think some of it's available on YouTube, whether he's giving discourses or there's a long phase where he was engaging with reporters and answering questions and enlightening them with his answers. But if you listen to the man talk, it's a unique feature of a human being that's being expressed when he's speaking, and it's different from what I normally experience. And I think it kind of he had a woman named Sheila who recognized his greatness being exposed to him by her parent when he was a younger intellectual and professor, but she was even a much younger young woman or even girl. And then she actually believed in him, and she put some of her talents into really giving a effort or wings to some of his abilities that gave him a worldwide acclaim. But she recognized something in him at a young age, and she referred to that as Saraswati, I think, in one interview. And I think I apologize, I'm not for pronouncing that right, but that would be this. I've said in other videos that other languages have a vocabulary for things that we're maybe familiar with, but we can't lay a finger on it. That in India they have a lot of words like that. So that Saraswati is one talking about that profound, both the eloquence and the wisdom. But then going a step back, just a simple enunciation would be called, I think in that same heritage, would be Divani that's responsible for that. And it's similar where when we're engaging with people, it requires a reciprocity and respect to have the language living in interacting between us. And then it's also similar in writing. I put in another form that to offer statements or to offer communication verbally in literary terms. It requires the same, if not greater, respect and collaboration between someone expressing themselves and someone being received, whether that be two people corresponding in real time, or if there's a time or distance lag, even to communicate beyond the grave. Because I've been blessed by the works of no less than Arthur Avalon, who preemptively left his understandings of teachings of India into a canon of work that could be understood by Western readers, with him having then the knowledge that he would be soon past, he was already advanced in age. So he left it as a heirloom and an inheritance to both people of India that may be deprived of some of their own teachings, as those lines were close to being endangered by circumstance, but then also extending that to Western audiences, such as a person myself coming across a book of his in a used bookstore, having been left a Bible study one night because I was feeling like I wasn't being fed, and coming across that book, and then having my life changed, my perspective changed from what he had done preemptively through literature or through literacy. And when I first encountered his works, it was very difficult to get through even one paragraph, but I could feel the weight of what he was talking about. And after engaging with it over days, weeks, months, I think in the first year I hardly got past like the first couple pages of his book, The Serpent Power. But then keep on engaging, and now I can read most of his books as simple as though I were reading a children's book. One, because I gained an understanding of how punctuation works, but then just following his line of reasoning and his tone and his tense and his sentence structure, it increases the attention span, and then it makes it where it's actually flowing, and there's nothing superfluous about it. It's like a transmission that is somewhat out within and outside of time constraints. But so all I meant to say is that communication requires a deep respect, and it's a collaboration, and it's the same with like uploading content and like in leaving comments and stuff like that. It's similar to that. But then some of it is somewhat being lost, I think, by the nature of our reality now, our social reality that is heavily intertwined with technology to where the attention span has gotten it has been affected, and also the ways of relating to people have. And there's an eloquence in the new style. Like sometimes I was engaging with a company that I'm transacting with, and the very professional people on the front line, the high ranking people, their texts are so curt, blunt, and they're curt, blunt, and taciturn, where they're hardly saying anything. But there's certain power with that. And I think that's the way a lot of people text. But it does, at a certain way, it does like maybe show like a little bit of lack of respect for who you're communicating with. And there's a content creator called Everett Overton, and he talks a lot about like men's style and stuff like that. And he's like a real player from Chicago. And I was telling a young person recently who was talking about Chicago that I think that one thing that someone told me when I was a young man, just about to be a man, but that person was already a man and had been from Chicago. He said that if you can do something in Chicago, you can do it anywhere. And then I was thinking that must be true of Michael Jordan, because he could win in Chicago, so he could win. I would dare say at his best, he could win on any basketball court in any place of the world. But having really cut his teeth in Chicago. So this Everett Overton, he's a player type of guy. So being from Chicago, I think that it might be similar with him, where if he can win being a player in Chicago romantically, then he can probably win in a lot of places. But he talks about, as much as he understands about socializing and being smooth, he commends adult men to write as though they were adult men, and to not imitate the modern trends, and to really express yourself clearly and proficiently or clearly and fully. And so I came across that inside of his as the pandemic was winding down, and then I got into different job settings of a professional role where I had to communicate over radio means. And I was taking that same method of his of just actually saying what needs to be said. And I got compliments from different co-workers that would say that would call me professional at different locations. But then I also came through some very difficult and trying and nuanced circumstances that had very heavy consequences. And by expressing myself clearly, I took a little bit of flack for that, but I also got through those successfully. And I think that I put in another form. So where I was going is that in late fall last year, I've always got a lot of disrespect in different settings, but one person went so far as to affront my faith as a man, as that it, not in a religious sense, but as it expressed in abstaining from pork. And it was pretty heavy how he couched his statement. And then he also went on to suggest that I'm not competent to order my own life without the oversight of a faith body. And so with my own background around faith circles, but just as a man, those are really heavy comments to lay into someone. And it made me think that I really might need to reflect upon how I'm drawing so much disrespect, animosity, but more so just simple disrespect from people of all walks and grades of life, stations in life. I can get disrespected by people of almost all backgrounds and demographics. So part of me understanding myself was that I took a step back from a role I had been doing, and I leaned into independent contract work and also content creation. And then so in this space, but then also in another forum that I have become aware of through YouTube, but that forum encourages and requires participation and offering original thought and insight to gain rank and then access to higher levels of learning. You can't simply just get past a paywall. You have to actually add original insight. So that combination of the content creation with the original music inspiration and then posting in this other forum, it helped me express a lot of ideas and actually grow as a person. But I took a lot of flack in that forum for the way that I expressed ideas. And I also had I had a post in there that I think that some of that some of our ideas around literacy and expressing ourselves, at least in the United States, goes all the way back to the time of slavery, where where literacy, the right to vote, the right to own property, and then sovereignty, the ability to make decisions and be respected as a full-bearing, incompetent person of majority, having agency for yourself. All of those are closely related, including the term white and whiteness. And I referenced in I came across a source that explains that word whiteness is not to do as it existed in the time where voting, literacy, and agency was contentious. That term white is more of a status than an actual living genetic or ethnic reality. And so I'd also put in that form that a lot of times people of all ethnicities, nationalities have experienced hatred and racism. People who are considered black, people who are considered white, people who are considered both, people who are considered different, people who are considered any combination of those, all people experience hate and racism, and it's painful and awful in all its expressions. But sometimes this word white, when people reach for that word, what they don't, they can sense what they mean, but what they don't, without being aware of the history of that word, they might not understand that they're referring to a legal and a class designation, a caste designation, as that word originally existed, and some reflexes around that people's misinterpretation of what that word how that word has functioned, but then also how people's appearance is related to that word, understanding of that word. There's still there's a lot of dissonance about that, where people who may be like of me, like I can appear like I have it might not be clear what my ethnicity is, but a person can maybe sense that I don't appear to be I would guess a lot of people don't respect me as a sovereign adult in like what I experience in work and stuff like that, and it may or may not have to do with that word whiteness like that. But all I meant to say is that when I attempt to express myself respectfully and using vocabulary that corresponds with the ideas I'm expressing, I tend to get blasted out of the sky like that. And I think some of it has to do with that on a level. Sometimes people simply don't respect a person who appears to be what would be of color, which back in that history, that word color is like that word color is it's another designation that means that it's less than having full rights is what that word color means. And so some of us who may appear like what people think that word corresponds to, we are not given the respect that communication requires, and that can be in a professional setting, a social setting, a learning setting. It happens a lot. And so I pointed that out there, that there's still a lot of challenges around literacy and issues of status and identity, and I think there's a lot of lost things that are lost for that. But so what I wanted to express in this video is that, so all I'm going to say is that I've been engaging more with different content, but I also get a lot of disrespect when I attempt ideas because people simply won't accept the ideas coming from me, I think. But what I wanted to say is, like, I was thinking about today I was thinking about how, like, a lot of times, like, you may experience, like, when you're dealing with technology, there's a YouTuber I pointed out at different times named King Noble, and he talks about he has his content can be very polarizing, and so I put another video that I don't recommend, just to land there with if it's not a person's cup of tea. But he also does have a lot of really strong messages, and he was saying in one video how there always seems to be some kind of minute technical difficulty when we're interfacing with technology. And that's true, but I think that that might be deeper than it seems, because, so for one, it's true, like I do different videos, and then I only have so much high-speed internet a month, and then it defers back to the slower rate. And when it gets that slow, I can't upload much of anything because it'll take me like half a day to upload 4% of a video. So I find myself closer and closer to relatives' house with Wi-Fi, so I can upload stuff. But the deeper thing is that, yes, there is always some type of shortcoming or with a lot of the technology that we have. But I think that the implications of that are much broader and deeper than it might seem. So, and this is a little bit stemming to with content that I put in another form of posting essays that I had referenced. But so I have to be careful that I don't self-plagiarize myself, since I had posted in another space. But so with the technology, so the internet, as I understand, I can't recall the man's name off the top of my head. I think that it would be really handy for anyone to know this man's name, because you would appear what education is in erudition. I think it's somewhat arbitrary in the modern age, but we can sense when a person is versed on a subject. And I think that it would be a point of education and erudition for anyone to be aware of this man's name. But there's a particular man who's credited with conceiving what the original idea and concept of what became the internet. And I don't have that man's name off the top of my head, but it would be a really handy fact to have that man's name. And as I understand is that I don't know the full background and scope of the internet, but I know that it's some of what and how far back it goes. But I know that what's generally and broadly understood is that it was used around like the time of the Vietnam War. Like I think that there were what would be like servers and like internet type communication going on during the conflict in Vietnam, and then that came a couple 1, 2, 3 decades later, it actually became what became the internet apparatus before, like, and leading into like the .com boom and like when the internet really began to proliferate around I think like the late 90s. But it had become mainstream and popular at least in the early 90s, because I remember my father had a modem, and that was like this really cool thing where my other friend's father also had a modem. They would communicate on it, and it seemed like out of this world. But but all I meant to say is that what we know about as the internet is it can be associated with the military. I don't have strong references for that, and maybe anyone who could provide references or insight about that in the comments, that'd be appreciated. But I do know that there's an association between the military and the internet. But then going beyond that, there's also a deeper back history between what's called the military and imperialism, or would be like hegemony or chauvinism of extending one culture's values and interests broadly and upon another culture or people to subject the latter and extract, if not extort, resources and value from the latter in inequitable, lopsided manner. That'd be the most clear way I could define imperialism. And I think that imperialism is greater than any one nation or kingdom or people historically. It's just a very deep human. It's just the collective and social and cultural outcomes and realities of our self-interest as human beings, amounting to in one of its maybe most grand and in its most refined or in its strongest expression as imperialism, and that really took prominence like in the colonial phase, and then like with slavery and things like that. But then even into the modern era, into the current day, that imperialism has not left us. And what I think maybe it would even be a more eloquent way of describing imperialism than what I had just offered is that it is the conserving and the doling of resources along arbitrary lines, whether that's nepotism ethnic and ethnic, racial, and ethnic and racial pretensions and arbitrary notions, which is that any notion about ethnicity, race, gender that is fixed, that is arbitrary, that is settled. It can't stand to reality, because there are no straight lines in nature, and there are no true boundaries in nature. Nature is seamless and comprehensive, yet diverse at the same time. So as soon as you introduce the idea of what is a man, what is a woman, what is black, what is white, all that stuff, you are inflicting violence upon human beings, because a human being is transcendent and unlimited by nature. So any hard, fast rules or definitions of a human being are destined and inevitable to be both futile and violent. But so going back to maybe around the time of, just as an example, like the time of the caste system in the United States, as what we call slavery, is that these are still arbitrary lines, and they more or less they more or less fixed and fashioned and segregated resources, more so than human beings is the segregation of resources, and that is still attempted up until this very day as a part of what prompted, conceived, and then has remained as the impetus of what we know of as the World Wide Web, or the Matrix, to use an overused and trite metaphor, but not effective or not accurate metaphor being the Matrix. But so it maybe to harp on the Matrix. So the word Matrix, I think that refers to like a womb or like a woman. I think there's something about a matrix is like it's like a womb. And so we obviously all exist in that, but I would say maybe the most poignant way to describe the Matrix would be like, if you can imagine a Matrix being a mother who has favorite children, or is attempting to have a favorite child. So you have you have different children who are all related and all equally dependent on the mother, yet the mother has arbitrary lines about which child deserves more and which one's better. And they say, actually, I think some creatures in nature, like whether it be birds or lions, they actually favor certain children, and whichever children appear to be strong, confident, happy, healthy, and therefore more likely to survive, that mother favors and leans into that child. But then maybe going deeper than that, even nature herself does similar things, or what we now have as the Matrix does similar things, to where the premise of the Matrix to this day is still to extract resources, hoard resources, and then mitigate and appropriate those resources selectively and with favor upon certain recipients. Yes, effort factors into it, and effort's not outside of the picture. Good decision making, stuff like that, is not outside of the picture, not outside of the equation. However, there are lean biases and favorites, I think, within what we call the Matrix. And that's why there's so many walls in the Matrix. There's so many kind of like in the film The Matrix, where there's that notion of the man that had the keys. It's kind of similar with the Matrix, where anytime you interface with online, it's all about either paywalls or passwords or codes. It's all about limiting who has access to what. And the deeper premise of that is just simple imperialism and the conservation and meting of resources, the doling of resources upon arbitrary lines that are probably equally sophisticated. But what I meant to say is, because of that, there as long as we exist that way and the Matrix exists that way, there will always be shortcomings in it and things that aren't working smoothly. As sophisticated as the Matrix is, a lot of times it doesn't work smoothly when we're trying to do very simple things. And that's from a deeper motion and underlying premise is that it's lopsided and biased. And so I want to say that you know, we look at, like, I was watching some videos of like some men in combat in the in Europe right now, heaven forbid, and the things that they're having to do just to survive and get through these battles that they're placed in, where I would imagine that many of the people in those battles, they may have strong reasons for being there, but I think they may not totally understand the total scope of why they're there and what is going on there. And I know I don't, from a bystander, but and I've heard similar things, like during the time of the conflict in Southeast Asia, known as like the Vietnam conflict, which is that many of the people, there were real reasons for different people in that struggle. Probably more so the people who are who had initiated that struggle, like I think with the French first, and then the Americans, who had real concerns, and they were being deprived and disenfranchised of their own land and their own means to sustain themselves. So from that point, I would be asinine to say they didn't have a reason to fight. And then you have other people, like say from the West, who are dropped off there and forced to survive there under whatever pretense of nationalism or whatnot. And then they actually amount to having friends with them, and then they depend on their friends for their life, and then their friends may get hurt, and then they actually are now more so identified with the struggle that they hadn't understood the premise of in the first place, and then it becomes more real, and it morphs into something something profound and unimaginable. But there had been some real things that were going on that caused that to start. But the deeper issue is, I think, would just be imperialism in that sense, and that it's the same now. In that, so with the lopsided, and that was before what we have as the matrix has become as profound as it has. But the inequity and the lopsided distribution of resources was the same there, and it's the same now. And it's also similar even within a nation that's not necessarily extended in conflict. Is that you have different business interests and all kinds of different interests that are self-centered, selfishness and profit is their premise. So the author Naomi Klein, she has a book called No Logo, and she has books that she talks about some of the atrocities of the big business interests, no less than pharmacy and all those the big monsters that I'd have a lot of nerve to even mention their names in a video, as much influence and power as they have. And then you have she was talking about some of the organizations of in the United States that have leveled atrocities around the world in like very sophisticated divide and conquer schemes that have amounted to heinous practices, no less than the perfection of interrogation methods to humble and obscure people, like in the different parts of the Americas and maybe Asia too, and some of the most heinous things that we may have never heard about. But what she talks about is there's something called an externality, which is that if I do something that is lopsided, like say I'm working in my house and I have chemicals that are unhealthy, maybe to the point of being deadly, but they're at least unhealthy, and I have them in my apartment, and I'm making profit with them in my own way. I found a way to get over with these chemicals, but the odors and the emissions that are spreading out to my neighbors or the community through the window. Say I have a way of fuming it out the back window, and that's permeating into the neighborhood, and people don't know it. So I'm making profit from that, but some of the cost of that profit and the risk and the detriment is being passed on to other people, whether directly or indirectly, whether I completely know about it or don't, whether they completely know about it or don't. And these are just the incongruencies that are being extended by the nature of the way I'm engaging with what I'm doing and with other people from a self-interested standpoint. I think that the author Nicholas Taleb, he has a book where he talks about skin in the game. So he talks about how, like, in the old times, like a person like respected as a military general or something like that, they never passed away neatly of natural causes on a peaceful bed. they were respected because they were on the front line, and they were respected so long as they stayed on the front line. But what Nicholas Taleb he has several brilliant books discussing like different properties of a risk management, and then all different nuanced